to the Bradley Prize's edition of Conceived in Liberty, a Bradley Speaker Series. I'm Rick Graber, president of the Bradley Foundation. Thanks so much for joining us. Our guest today is distinguished economist and scholar Glenn Loury. Glenn is the Merton P. Stoltz Professor of Economics at Brown University, a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, and a distinguished visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution. And he's also a 2022 Bradley Prize winner. Congratulations and welcome, Glenn. It's great to have you with us.
Rick, it's very good to be with you. Thank you.
Glenn, you've had an amazing career, including becoming a tenured professor of economics at Harvard when you were only 33 years old. Tell me what drew you to a life in academia and, I guess more specifically, to the field of economics?
I started out at Northwestern University as a transfer scholarship student. I was married with kids, I had a full-time job, and somehow, because of a terrific junior college teacher, I got referred to Northwestern. They wanted to take a chance on a Black kid from the south side of Chicago. They gave me a full ride, and I got introduced to mathematics at a serious level, and I loved it. But it was 1970, 71, 72. I wanted to not be in a totally theoretical posture. Economics afforded me the opportunity to do some serious mathematics and statistics, but also to talk about some real issues. And I found myself at MIT in the early 1970s with the likes of the Paul Samuelsons and the Robert Solos and the Peter Diamonds and of the world. And I just fell in love with it. Terrific teachers, extraordinary opportunity, and discovering some of my gifts. I found economics to be my niche.
So interesting. Glenn, you've been really outspoken about issues of race and inequality and have challenged the identity politics that seem to be consuming our American culture. Why have you felt compelled to speak out?
You know, anything I say here is going to get filtered through political lenses, but I'm going to say it anyway. This is a great country. Opportunity is boundless here. Look at what has happened in the last half century for Black Americans in this country since the early days of the Civil Rights Movement.
Yes.
I think the narrative that the wokesters, let me call them, are so married to, white supremacy, I think it's historically wrong. I think it is existentially erroneous for African Americans. I think it gives us an easy out from the challenges of our freedom. I think the problem for us is not oppression. I think the problem for we African Americans, for us African Americans in the 21st century is embracing the responsibilities of our freedom. When I look at the discourse, it drives me crazy. It's trendy. It's awash in all this postmodern rhetoric. It's mired in moral relativism. It's gratuitously contemptuous of the very civilizational foundations that make our lives possible here in the United States of America. I mean, all of us Americans. And I just, you know, I'm not going to go out without saying my piece about it.
Fantastic. Well, let's talk a little bit more about your personal story. As you said, you're from the south side of Chicago. I know you said on a podcast recently that while the South Side used to be rough, it had a really vital Black community. Yet there's been such a tremendous decline in safety over the years, which has impacted communities, especially the last 2 years, as violence and crime seems to have skyrocketed. Certainly the same is true on the north side of Milwaukee, which is just a couple of miles from where I'm sitting today. Just what are we getting wrong as a society in addressing this culture of violence and recklessness?
I'm not sure I've got the answer there, Rick. I mean, I think the mass moral panic or mass hysteria attendant to the civil disturbances in the aftermath of the murder. Yes, jury has spoken. A jury has spoken. We respect what juries say here of George Floyd in Minneapolis and the Black Lives Matter movement, the characterization of policing as a one-dimensional thing. I mean, there are issues with policing. I mean, we can talk about them, but the characterization of police as the enemy of the community, a failure, I think, again, to take responsibility for the behavior of our young people. I mean, an 11-year-old kid is assaulted by a police officer at 2:00 in the morning, and the story will be police officer assaults 11-year-old kid. The story will never be, what the heck is an 11-year-old doing wandering on the streets of Chicago at 1:00 in the morning? Where are those parents? Fatherlessness, again, you're not supposed to say this in the post-feminist age, but boys growing up without fathers in the home, finding their masculinity expressed in the gang culture that might be prevalent in their neighborhoods and so on. James Q. Wilson, the late James Q. Wilson, I believe he's a former honoree of the Bradley Prize. He was a friend of mine. He and I had our differences. I went through my anti-mass incarceration phase, and I was mad at Jim. I was mad at him for a bit there. But this visionary observer of American political culture put his finger on something important about morality, about decency, about the foundations of civil society. And I think we've forgotten the wisdom that James Q. Wilson and his cohorts imparted. So, that's how I see it. Without being a criminologist, that's how I see it, Rick.
Well, I totally agree. Well, let's talk about what's going on at universities. You've been part of the academy for a long time. In theory, universities should be institutions that foster free speech and viewpoint diversity, but these days, people are afraid to say anything that's even mildly provocative. You, on the other hand, have been very vocal on controversial issues, as we've discussed, and have criticized the positions of your own university. You ever worry about backlash and the impact that it may have on your own career?
No, I don't. I'm cancel proof over here. First of all, I'm Black. I mean, they can try to cancel me, but the racist argument doesn't really go very far in my case. I think, what's the old saying? To whom much is given, of him much shall be required. I have the opportunity to address myself to these questions. And whereas my junior colleagues might feel, fearful to speak out about this or that, let's get rid of the SAT. I mean, I'll just take one example. Let's get rid of the SAT. To which my answer is, wait a minute. The very standards that I was going to use to demonstrate my fitness to be a part of these elite cadres that are being trained at these very selective universities, you want to take it away so that I no longer have the ability to prove objectively that I'm just as good as the next guy? Why would you do that? I can say that, but a 30-year-old assistant professor probably doesn't want to get into that kind of trouble. So I feel a responsibility to speak out. And the other thing, and I don't want to go on too long here, but identity politics is poisoning our country. Identity pedagogy, read Afro-American Studies Department, Blacks only welcome here, is poisoning our training of these young people. But identity epistemology, if you're Black, you can know it this way. If you're white, you know it that way. Well, that's what I thought the Enlightenment was meant to refute.
Incredible. Thanks so much. You've accomplished a lot in your career. You could slow down, you could retire, but you're doing just the opposite. And it looks like you're having a lot of fun along the way with your media appearances, your podcasts. What do you hope people, especially young people, learn from you? And how do you encourage those who are just beginning their careers, how to help them navigate through this cancel culture?
Study hard. Don't dismiss the canon without acquainting yourself with it.
Good advice.
Speak your minds. At the end of the day, don't be led around with a ring through your nose, being told what to think. You're at the university not to learn what to think, but to learn how to think. So, this is 20 years old, 22 years old. You got nothing to do except go to the library or hang out at the pub or talk to your friends or whatever. The world is your oyster. Don't miss out.
Are your students doing that? I mean, what do you see in today's students?
I mean, I'm actually kind of hopeful over here at ultra woke Brown University. I teach a seminar, it's in its second year now, Free Inquiry in the Modern World. And we start reading Plato's Apology of Socrates, and we go on to Milton's Areopagitica, his petition to the British Parliament not to license books. And we read John Stuart Mill, and we read Václav Havel and George Orwell and Alan Bloom, Closing of the American Mind, and Roger Shattuck, Forbidden Knowledge. I mean, we read real books. These 20 kids are just soaking it up. The room is filled with energy. Now, they're 22-year-old kids. They were born in the 21st century. So, you know, their views about the various trendy issues of the day are going to be of their generation. But when I challenge them, Alan Bloom wants to talk about the soul. He says where the university has become a soulless place. He says people don't know what real music, what real literature is. They don't know how to have relationships with each other. Everything is so superficial. Everything is so transactional. And I get them to thinking about it. Their first reaction is, he's an old white man. But by the time we drill down a little bit, they get to see that, Shakespeare actually was talking about something, I mean, talking about the human condition. I mean, a lot has changed since the late 16th century, but some stuff is just embedded in the human condition, and you can learn a lot at the university. So I'm hopeful that with the right inspiration, these kids can be shaken out of their routines and forced to think. That we can't ask them to agree with us, but we can ask them to think.
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to do.
It's great. Glenn, since this is our Bradley Prizes edition, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask one last question, and that is, what's it mean to you to be a Bradley Prize winner this year?
Wow. Well, I feel like it's the culmination of something, and it's a certification and a acknowledgement of the value of what I've been doing. I mean, I have, various honors to my credit, fellowships in this and that society and whatnot, but this is really special. American exceptionalism, making a contribution to how we think about our civilization here in the Western Hemisphere. We're in the 3rd century of the American experiment. And to be included within this pantheon of, let's just be clear, conservative thinkers, it's a great honor. And the cash stipend is not that bad either, Rick.
Professor Glenn Loury, thanks so much for your thoughts. Thanks for spending time with us today. Thanks for your courage, for your commitment. We truly do appreciate you being with us.
Thank you very much, Rick.
And of course, thanks to all of you for joining us on this edition of Conceived in Liberty.